Welcome to the Born and Move podcast, where we explore topics at the intersection of human movement, health, and longevity. My name is Quinn Sandler. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Plantiga. We often say that humans are born movers. This podcast is our attempt to expand the conversation around movement, how we run, walk, jump, and its importance in both sport and life. This is our first show. Our very first guest is both a friend of mine and the vice president of player performance at the Los Angeles Dodgers. Brandon McDaniel has spent over 10 years with that organization and today oversees all things performance throughout the organization. It's a pleasure to have you on. Thanks for being here. How's it going, Brandon?
Good, Gwen. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it and really look forward to this. I think we've had 100 of these conversations, so now we're just going to record one.
Exactly. I'm looking forward to it. So first question that I wanted to kick it off with is, you as a practitioner, you manage the health and performance of a number of athletes. When we think about movement, how does movement come into play from your practitioner's eye when you're assessing programming, etc.?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think that, we have to always take a step back and look at the lens of the person that is playing, look at the lens of the person that's evaluating, looking at the lens of maybe the coach or the manager or somebody along those lines. And so for the longest time, I was always trying to look at it from the lens of an FMS or from a NASM screen or, from a PRI lens or whoever, whatever it might be. And I think those are all great things. I think a lot of the different groups that are out there put together movement screens and interventions and thought processes and developed whole business models on it. I think it's amazing. But I really had to start looking at it from the eyes of the beholder, which was usually the athlete. And so understanding how they want to move, how they want to feel, because I think a lot of times we're chasing feelings with athletes. I want to feel this when I get in the batter's box. I want to feel this when I'm on the court. I want to feel this when I'm throwing the football. And really just started to take a step back from the other models and seeing where they fit in for each one of the athletes that I worked with. And so when I look at a catcher, when I look at a first baseman, I look at a center fielder, I'm looking at why are they here? One of them is really fast. One of them can hit a baseball really far, and one of them can catch one really well. And the things that make them all good are usually completely different. And so I'd really try to understand the reason why I'm working with that athlete, or the reason why I have the ability to work with them is because they had the ability to get there.
I think that's a really good point that is often overlooked is there's no one model in terms of assessing or looking at any athlete that you can apply even within the same sport. Each position has different sets of movements that they do. And I feel like that's a really good point is that it's so individual and unique both to the position, but as well as the actual athlete themselves.
Totally. I mean, I can't tell you how many movement screens I've tried to fix that my eye wasn't on the prize. I wasn't looking at the things that made them really good and trying to improve those. Like a little strength finders 2.0 of just trying to improve our strengths and maintain our weaknesses. And at the same time, looking at the things they don't do very well, and I'm avoiding loading those parameters. I'm avoiding workload as much as possible in a game setting with them in those movement patterns. And then ultimately, is there some low-hanging fruit in season that when we have the athletes the most that I can train them and I'm not pulling away too much equity from the rest of their day to put them in a position to either A, get hurt, or B, perform, at a very low level.
I think that's such a good point. When we drive into testing a little bit more, how often, as a practitioner, would you like to be testing and assessing? Is there too much, too little? And kind of what's your ideal that you found over your career?
That's also, I think, just a great point of where we are as a society right now. Dan Gable, I'm wearing my Hawkeye hat, and I didn't even mean to talk about Dan Gable. Dan Gable was the wrestling coach at Iowa for a long time. I was not a wrestler, but anything Iowa I'm kind of into. Totally. He used to say it, if it's important, you do it every day. And if it's not important, you never do it. And I think that when we talk about screening, at this point in my career, like, I don't have a goniometer in my eyes. Like, I can't walk around and look at somebody and say that was 47 degrees and yesterday was 46 degrees. But after the first session and after the first couple of weeks that I've been training an athlete, I have a pretty good idea what the limitations are and like the number one factor. And I think when you go to athletes too many times, when you go to the well and you ask them too much, like, screening becomes a chore, and then screening doesn't even become screening. It just becomes a box that you check. So we don't even get effort. And so, but if I go back to them and say, hey, I think like your internal rotation of your hip, or I think that the elasticity that you're producing when, in your force plate numbers, or I think that your ability to keep like a good posture, 45-degree angle posture, when you're running is affected by your ankle dorsiflexion. Now I have buy-in, and now it becomes like every day is kind of this constant screen, intervention, compete, recover, screen, intervention, compete, recover, that now we're like, okay, you know what, we're in a good spot. And now this can kind of go in the maintenance category. I hate the word maintenance, but you know what I mean, of like, this box has been taken care of, and now we don't want to make it any worse. And now what's the next lowest hanging fruit that we can go attack off of that initial movement screen? And sometimes, and you know this very well, I think too, that you take care of that one piece, and we know sometimes we hit it, and then the rest of them kind of fall in line. Back pain starts to go away, knee pain starts to go away, the hip gets opened up, the T-spine gets opened up, and all of a sudden, like, whew, I'm feeling loosey-goosey, and then they get hot, and now we got like a bought-in athlete. And that's like the most gratifying thing as a practitioner, or as a coach, or anything we do, even as an educator, is like when you have the aha moment, or their body has the aha moment, like, watch out. That's a lot of fun. That's very powerful.
I think you brought up a really good point there. It's using the data and what you get from these assessments to have a conversation. I would imagine, just with your career, have you seen athletes in the last couple years have more of an understanding for some of that stuff as opposed to, let's say, 10 years ago? Have you seen that kind of change in time?
There's an appetite for sure. I think there's some wearable technology out there that has really just kind of exposed athletes to a lot of things, and whether it's their HRV, or it's their sleep numbers, or their fitness score, or whatever that might be. I think that's opened it up to be safe for them, which is the most important thing. No one's going to use this information against me. This information is not bad. It can only be used to help me improve in some way. And more importantly, like, I think people found out, like, the information is usually individualized. Your HRV could be 100, and mine's always right around 50.
Totally.
And when I compare it to the strength coaches I work with that are living in the hundreds, I'm like, oh, God, like, I'm a pile. And, but then there's other people I know that are in the 20s, and they would die to have my HRV, and like, it's just very, very individualized. And so I think that we've come a long way. Social media has come a long way in promoting those types of things. I think the access to wearable technology has promoted those things as well. That the players get hooked to it, very similar to they get hooked to a technique in the training room. They get hooked to a type of training in the weight room, or there's a massage therapy technique that they use, or whatever it might be. And I think wearable technology is coming along that way. And for me, my mission in life is to offer a buffet, but to make sure that when you come in, you get the things off of the buffet that you need and the things that you want, and don't feel like you have to try everything. Don't feel like just because there's 12 pieces of protein on there that you need to have all 12 of them. Let's get the one that we need. And if you want to try another one just to see what what it's like, let's just make sure we don't have 20 ounces of it. Maybe we can have a couple ounces of it.
I think that's a great analogy. And again, that comes back to that kind of individualized kind of testing, assessing, and then kind of that conversation. Kind of going back to that question, it made me think of this concept of movement efficiency. And I find this is such an interesting thing that you, with your background, probably intuitively understand the balance between getting objective measures of how somebody moves and then seeing things with your eye, which is hard to even put words around. How much do you look at movement efficiency, or kind of what's your thought process even on that concept? And how do you kind of look at that when you're dealing with some of the athletes that you work with?
Yeah, we had this conversation as a staff yesterday because we really try to sit down at the end of the year and reevaluate, right? Like what went well, what went poor, what were the things that we could affect and change, what were the things that maybe were out of our hands that we need to prepare for next year, and really just try to take a realistic view of that. And one of the questions that came up is like, we're always pulling from these two parameters. Like there is getting better at the sport, and there's getting better at the weight room. And I got strength coaches that want to get better in the weight room, and they're damn good at it. And I got people who are passionate about the sport that we train, and they want to get better at it. Now, how do I use those two things with the athlete in the middle of it to make that better? And so there's some Hall of Famers in every sport that we would not take their movement screen or their movement efficiency profile and put it up in a presentation and go share it at whatever conference we were at, right? We've all worked with those athletes. I got plenty of them. And
totally.
I also know that there are some that dominate their movement screens or their movement efficiency profiles, and they play and have great, long, successful, both financially and professionally, careers. And if you told them that, like, hey, your shoulder range of motion was pretty poor, they'd be like, I really don't care. And so
look at my numbers, like look at my output. Does it really matter? Right.
And like, you win the MVP next year, Quinn, and I come to you and say, hey, throw that out. That was wrong. And so I really go about it, and we really go about it from two ways. Like there's a chronic occurrence that takes place with bad movement efficiency. And I always feel like, and I think I explain it this way, and I don't think it's always this black and white, but when you fall off the ledge with bad movement efficiency, it's really hard to get back. Like it's really hard to crawl back up to where you were. And it's just like one more thing that you've got to deal with. When that ankle mobility or that knee stability or that hip mobility or whatever it might be isn't in place, now the cascade that we talked about on the other end, when we kind of clean things up, I think it takes place pretty quickly, and now it's hard to catch your breath. So slowly integrating, slowly changing. Like people think we have to make changes in movement profiles, and if you can't change it in the first couple of minutes, then it's not a neurology problem, it's a structural problem. Maybe they're not ready. Maybe they don't want to. And vice versa. Like, this guy's got a structure problem. He's bone on bone, or he's got no space, or if we do anything like, okay, well, maybe we don't have to throw the kitchen sink at him today, but maybe in 5 years we can look up and we're in the same place. Isn't that a win? To be able to keep them where they are. And so we have to give some credit to the movement efficiency for the long haul. But for the short term, I always describe it as a dirty closet. I got a football, I got a tennis racket, I got a basketball, I got some tennis balls in there. I got all kinds of stuff in my closet. And I know exactly where all of it's at. And for me, it's completely organized. And I go in there and I say, I'm going to take the golf ball out today. And everything falls out. Like some of these guys are dirty closets, and it works. And all the stuff's in there, and the door shuts, and they get the job done. And it isn't maybe the perfect setup for them, but right now it's working. It works for them, and I've seen it too, where we get a little arrogant sometimes, and I think it ends up being more ignorance. But we get a little arrogant. I got to make that better. I don't know if we want to. I think that if we do, well, let's pick the right time. Let's pick the off season. Let's pick the time when we're not playing. Maybe when they're on the DL or the IL and they can't play as much as they're supposed to be. Like we can change our focus, but if your strategy included low back extension and low back flexion to throw 94, and I rob that from you, you might not throw 94, and the first time that you look up at the gun and you see that it's not 94, your brain's going to say, I got to figure out how to do this. And it's going to find a new strategy to do it, one that you probably don't have tolerance in.
Yeah, which then might lead to some type of injury. I think what's fascinating about that too is we kind of know from our work that you see learned adaptations as well. Some athlete might have an injury in university, and then they've learned to work in a certain way. And then if you try to fix that, you're kind of going back, like think of it like a building, you're going back to level 2 when they're on level 10. And if you start like Jenga, start removing some of the blocks on level 2 and trying to correct those movement efficiencies, you can just basically open up a Pandora's box of issues. And you probably have way more experience than me. I definitely have seen that where, you're going to try to work with a practitioner, with an athlete, and you actually you almost like nick a cancer. You nick something thinking that you're trying to be helpful, and it just flows into something way worse. And it's brutal.
No, and I hate it. I hate it too because what we're talking about right now, there are people out there that they want to turn us off. Like, right? They're like, oh, we can fix it. And I get it. And there are way better practitioners out there. There's way better strength coaches. There's trust me. I know where I sit in that world. But my failures, a lot of them at that, has allowed me to take a step back and say, wait a minute, like either we got to be dynamite with our implementation with this, which is tough. Because we're dealing with humans, oh, by the way, that have emotion too, and have 0 for 4 nights and have 6 for 30 nights shooting and 12 for
the mental
12 for
right?
12 for 25 nights of passing, and that just pulled a hammy or something happened at home. Like, we're dealing with humans, and so I'm much more pragmatic than I ever was at implementing and changing, just from the sheer fact of I've done more harm than good sometimes by thinking, this will work because I read it in a book, right? It'll work.
I took a course, I went to some biomechanics conference and someone said this about patellar tendinopathy, so let's try that. And you end up just blowing something up way worse,
And I am in a position now, which is awesome, to be able to do this. But if I want to call you and talk about Plantiga, I can call you and talk about Plantiga. I don't have to read about you online. I can call you and I would much rather you come in and talk about it than me.
Yeah,
I'll get you in the door, but you're the expert. You're the subject expert on that. And I feel like it's the same way whenever if I have a guy I talk to about biomechanics, I have a guy I talk to about powerlifting, I have a guy I talk to about Olympic lifting, I have a guy I talk to about kettlebell training. Use your resources, because it goes back, and this goes back to my personal training days, give them what they need and give them what they want. Give them that buffet. And for the things that they need, I'm usually pretty good at those. I've had a lot of experience, and a lot of those things are going to be recycled. Sometimes the things that they want, I've never even heard of. And I'm what am I going to lie to them? No, I'm
totally.
You want to use Plantiga? Let's go get Quinn. He knows way more about it than I do. And you know what? We talk about continuing education for our staff. You talk about continuing education with your staff. What can we go get better at? There is no better continuing education than going to watch one of my athletes train with somebody else.
I bet. I think the point, though, that I kind of get every time that we talk is the one thing that I get when you really dive deep into sports science, sport performance, the more you learn, the more you realize that it is not blanket statements and methods for every athlete. It is so individualized. It's, evolving rapidly. So I could imagine that it's nice when I hear you talk, you are a student as much as you are an educator and a practitioner. And I feel like we take that very same approach. Is you have to be understanding that you don't know everything. So, ground contact time. Ground contact time is something that, depending on the surface, the sport, the environment, it's different, the athletes. Asymmetries is another big one. Baseball as an example, that's an asymmetrical sport. people run around in one direction, as an example. But it's
they're
just
NASCAR drivers. We literally turn. If things are going right, we're turning left. If things are going wrong, we're turning right.
Exactly. That's a really good point. Totally.
And I think you touched on a couple things there, like asymmetries, buzzword.
Yeah.
Right? But like,
totally.
This is what I love about the use of Plantica is I can put it on somebody when they're healthy. And now I have like a snapshot of what because there is an asymmetry.
Of course.
So what's the snapshot? And now can I get them, like, if they get hit by a pitch? Of course there's going to be more of an asymmetry, like, but is it something that I can live with? Is it manageable?
Totally.
And then, ground contact time, contact time is extremely important. But if I'm not taking into account like how much force I'm putting into the ground, what's my stride length? That might allow for a little bit more ground contact time. If I'm pushing more and gaining more, then I can be on the ground for a little bit longer. But if I'm taking itty bitty steps and put no force in the ground, I better not be on the ground a long time because I'm going to take a lot more steps. And I know that was like a layman's way of explaining running efficiency, but that's
true though.
Compare it to you. Compare it to what you do. And now when something happens, when something's going really good, I want to get you on the tech just as much as when something's going bad. And because I want to be able to explain the why of why you're good more than the why you're doing bad. Everybody knows why you're doing bad. Like, let's get in there and figure out why you're good, so when something goes wrong, we get you back to that.
Totally. I think you made a really good point there about the use of Plantica, and we really love to see this with all of the athletes and groups that we work with, is just this concept of building a baseline and a movement signature of how somebody moves. So if you can kind of collect runs and walks and jumps, having that on file is like getting blood work done. So then if some athlete says, my hip's kind of bothering me, or, I kind of tweak my knee in the shower, well, now we can kind of take another assessment, another sprint test or run test, and we can kind of see. And then we start making data-driven decisions. And I think that concept is obviously widely understood. I don't know if it's implemented as much as I would like it to be. Like we talk with NBA teams, and often they're not really doing baseline testing on how these guys run and walk. It's just not like some organizations are. Lots of people are not. I find that interesting. So, obviously it's nice that, you're using Plantica to kind of build some of that stuff, and I think it's important. And I think it's the basis for, again, that data-driven decision-making.
Yeah, and it's I have empathy and sympathy for the groups that don't. I think that we all sit in this. We all sit in two chairs, right? We sit in the chair that we do at work every day or at home or whatever it might be, that like you're living it, and things just aren't linear. And then we've all sat in the other chair. If I had that job, I would do this. And you don't know the context of the situation. And a run and a walk test might rob someone's equity that they build up. It might rob their bandwidth. Maybe they're a one-man band or one-woman band, and they don't have the time to do that, and they have to put it somewhere else. I know strength coaches are making protein shakes somewhere, and that's robbing them of time they could be collecting meaningful data. I know strength coaches are handing out meal money in some places. That's also robbing them of time that they could be doing strength and conditioning. And so we forget with these team sports that it's not like it's not this like perfect, you fit right into this hole and this is all you have to do. Like you branch out and do a lot of things because it's a team and things need to get done, and usually team players raise their hand and say, I don't care that it doesn't have anything to do with my job. I just want to make sure we get it done. And
that's awesome.
We're moving to a place in sports though, Gwen, where we're capable of less of that now. Like I think that the more and more, the longer and longer I've been in, the more people are getting added to staffs, and there's more specialists on staff. There's true sports scientists, there's applied scientists, there's biomechanists, there's strength coaches, there's movement coaches, there's recovery coaches. Like there's all these different things, and it's just really different. It's like different headaches now. Because now you went from, man, I could really use another person to help me collect this data, to now I got all this data. I don't have time to man. What am I going to do with all this data now? And
what does it mean? Like, how do I synthesize it all?
Right. Like, it just shifts. And so, and people always, I think it's our natural instinct as humans sometimes to just say, I want more. Like, that's not what you actually are asking for. You're asking for easier, and it's not going to get any easier. You're just making it more complex.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I think if you're a practitioner or even an athlete, you just want to know, what does it mean, and or what do I do about it? So,
right.
The data showed me X. Okay, cool. Like, who cares now? What can I do to fix it, correct? It's like Sherlock Holmes. Like, what can we put in place to see if I can correct this or work on that deficit? But yeah, I feel like sports science in general has come a long way, especially in the last 5 or 6 years. On that topic, where do you think it's going? Like, where do you think the next 5 or 10 years of sports science is going to go?
Personally, I think it's going to go. I think you talk about the data synthesization, and like, athletes only want meaningful data because you work in sports science, so sports science is very important to you. And so when you wake up in the morning, you think about you, your kids, your wife, and sports science, right?
Yeah, totally.
And I wake up and I'm doing very similar and whatever player performance thing kind of pops in front of my face. And athletes are waking up thinking about last night's game, saying, what can I do to get better today? And sometimes sports science doesn't fit in that.
No, totally.
Sometimes it's something else. Sometimes it's a nutrition issue, which you can classify that as sports science. Sometimes it was a uniform issue. Sometimes it was an equipment issue. Sometimes it was a sleep issue. Sometimes it was just a pure baseball issue. And sometimes it wasn't an issue and they just had a bad day. I don't think we allow that anymore. And so I think the next 5 years is we went through this clunky phase of, we're going to put this person in this position, this person in this position. We're collect this piece of data. Like, we're going to get to a spot where it's like, hold on. You don't go to the doctor when you feel bad and go, hey, I don't feel very bad. And he goes, well, here's a prescription for some Lipitor. I'll see you in 2 weeks. And he's like, wait a minute. What's Lipitor? It's cholesterol medication. Oh, so I have bad cholesterol? No, I'm not going to check it out. I'm just going to give this to you. And if it works, I won't see you. And if it doesn't work, I'll see you in 2 weeks. And sometimes in sports science, I think that's what we do. Is like, these 5 other guys had it, so you try this and let me know how it goes.
Totally. So I think kind of the future there is really what you're saying is personalized. I feel like,
applicable too. Like, application, I think, is just absolutely enormous.
Yeah, totally. Just another couple questions here, and then we'll wrap this up.
Yeah.
When we're looking at this idea of where we're going in the future of sports science, I think a big thing that we think of at Plantiga is how do we bring the democratization of some of this stuff to regular athletes, high school kids and college athletes and marathoners and triathletes and all of these different folks. Where do you see that almost trickle-down effect, but how do you see some of the work done at this elite level, and how do you see that kind of going downstream to not just everyday athletes, but competitive high school and college again? Like, where do you see that going? Because I feel like that we're just on the precipice of having some of this work kind of go down to regular folks. So it's not just the best athletes in the world have access to practitioners like you. It's kind of moving down. So what are your thoughts there?
The number one thing that happens when I went out to speak on the circuit is take said MVP, Cy Young Award winner, Rookie of the Year from the previous year, and somebody in the audience is for sure going to raise their hand and say, tell me what such and such athlete does in the weight room. Jeez. It's the wrong question. It's the wrong question. That's a cool question. Sometimes it's nothing, by the way. Like there are people that have done it that you're like, I don't even want to lie to you right now. Like nothing.
Not a whole lot. Yeah, totally.
Right. They're just really gifted. It's what did that athlete do at said age, at 14, at 15, at 16, at 17. Not what they're doing at 22 or 25 or 37. Ask me if your goal is to get the person to the next level, doing the program they're currently at, it's too late. Tell me about their background. Did they do gymnastics when they were a 4-year-old? Did they play soccer when they were a 5-year-old? Did they play t-ball? Did they play basketball? Did they play something cool? Were they in dance or whatever?
Were they dance? Yeah, that's such a good point.
And it just drives me insane sometimes because these are really, really intelligent people. They put way too much stock into what I do, thinking that they got there and I was like, it was this. You know what? It was the minivan lateral walks that we changed that day. That's where we had the aha moment. No, they had a huge engine. And they didn't develop that engine with me. I'm trying to make sure they don't wreck their car half the time.
That's
literally and physically. Literally, but and figuratively. Yeah. But ask the question of, and I think that you can then start to understand where tech can be used for the youth, for the adolescents, for the high school, for the college, because we should always have carrots, right? Mm-hmm. You should always be striving for the next level. And so what makes these college athletes, what made them really good in high school to get there? There's your carrot. These college athletes made it to pro ball, pro basketball. What was the carrot?
I feel like that point's not raised enough. That is so exciting. And maybe that's also into the next 5 to 10 years is when we think about wearables. So Plantiga, we're measuring biomechanics and movement and speed and things. But, think of being able to have that data collected on you when you're in grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, grade 12. So maybe when someone asks you in 10 years, hey, so, what program is this Cy Young, athlete did or is doing? You could go back and be like, actually, we have data off the last 15 years of this athlete, and let's kind of show you, whether it was non-sport specialization or we tried this. I think that's a really good point, and I think we're on the doorstep with wearables. I think whether it's HRV or respiratory rates or movement or things like that, and I'm hopeful that Plantiga can play a role there, but I really think that's just a solid point, and we're soon going to have that because again, it's not what the athlete's doing today. It's kind of what were the building blocks to get them there.
Yep, that's the story that was told.
Yeah, I like that. Well, I think that's a really good place to end. So I just want to say thanks so much for your time and for sharing some of the experience that you've had as both a practitioner and an educator and a coach. So thank you very much for being our kickoff guest.
No, I appreciate it, and I did not know that I was a kickoff guest, so I'm very grateful for that and honored. And this was fun. I got a little passionate in there, so I enjoyed that. I need that heading into the holiday season.
We'll love it. Cool. Well, thanks, buddy.
All right, man. You take care. Thank you.